Cool. So, welcome everyone. Another episode of NX's podcast for enterprise software. We're here today with Tine, a good friend of mine. We've done several things together now, I believe, between live streams and you being a part of the NX Champions program. It's
Mhm.
definitely seen you around a lot. But Tine, I'll give you the chance to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Tine Kondo. I'm a senior staff engineer for a company that is called SER. I work in Luxembourg, but we are also present in France and in Belgium. I'm a huge fan of NX, obviously. I've been contributing to the core of NX and also to the ecosystem through some plugins that I maintain in order to bring NX to other stack that are not yet covered by it officially. Like for example, the Java stack through a plugin for Spring Boot, for example, which is a very well known framework in Java. I also created some plugins around the Quarkus, which is also another framework that is very well used in Java world, as long as with a plugin for Flutter for the mobile development, and some stack that I personally use, and where I think that NX can be a good game changer in the way it helps maintain those projects basically. So I'm very happy to be back again on this podcast, which is the first time that we do it. But I say back again because we did some live stream before, and it's always a pleasure to be here and discuss about NX.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we still have the live stream. We need to get you back on that sometime when we want to see one of those plugins in
Anytime.
action again. Yeah, that'd be great.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was wondering if we could maybe dive in a little deeper to your company, if that's all right. Do you mind
Yeah,
talking about like you said your company is at SUR, you're in Luxembourg and in France right now. Would you mind talking
exactly.
just a little bit about the business, what y'all do?
Sure. So it's a consultant company, which means that we our main job is to help our client develop or maintain application.
Okay.
Mostly, we implement them through well-known framework like Spring Boot for the Java world, but also Angular, NX, every kind of technologies that are modern, basically. And our goal is to help the client get started with those projects.
Cool.
We either develop at the client level or inside my own company, and we provide our expertise in those fields. They also include cloud related architecture, and the scope is quite broad. And the idea is always to use the best technologies and tools in order to get the client started with what he needs to design, basically.
Cool. So your clients, are they usually tech companies or are they usually like
No,
more?
so I work for the Luxembourg version of my company. So
Mhm.
we here the ecosystem is mostly banks
Okay.
and insurance companies, but we also have clients that are governments, for example, or either also startups who want to get started with a software that they want to implement. So the scope is really broad, but the main players are banks and insurance company here in Luxembourg. In France, it's a bit different, but here in Luxembourg, our main customer are those kind of companies.
Cool. So what work do you find yourselves doing most of the time? Is like internal systems or is it more client facing or customer facing
It's
work that you get put on to do?
Well, it depends on we have different missions that we can have, and based on the mission, we will be different. Me, for example,
Okay.
for the past 3 years, I've been working for a client which is what we call here a fintech, which is
Okay.
a kind of startup in the industrial
So
ecosystem.
fintech in America has maybe two different connotations, which is weird. So maybe we could
Ah,
clarify a little bit. Like
okay,
fintech in the US, is recently with crypto on the rise. I hear fintech, I usually think crypto, but I
okay.
know that's not actually the case for a lot of people when they do talk about fintech. So,
Yeah, here in Luxembourg, it means a company which is well invested in the tech part. So,
Hmm.
because it will provide, for example, a platform as a service or a service as a service kind of
Hmm.
offering, and they will be doing that using the latest either cloud technologies or even front-facing technologies like Angular or React or so on, or Spring Boot for the backend. And
Hmm.
they all do that in the scope of developing or providing some financial services, for
Right.
example. So it can be like a company that will manage assets or investment funds, those kind of
Cool.
financial elements. And
Yeah.
fintech is the term that we use to designate kind of this kind of companies here
Very
in
cool. So
Luxembourg
so this
anyway.
is not this is fintech, not Web3 fintech, but like
Uh,
classical finance tech.
No, it's really like just a combination of the two words. It's not necessarily linked to the Web three or to the thing that you mentioned, like the blockchain or something like that. It can be, but
Mhm.
it's not necessarily the case. And the fin in the fintech comes because at the end, the company is providing a service that is related to the financial industry, basically. That's the term.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
that's a whole world I've been interested in, but I've never really gotten to have like my actual hands on it. A lot of the
Hmm.
contracting we did at NX. So, um, prior in NX, before we were focused on NX as a product, we were consultants ourselves.
Hmm.
And so I was often at banks, but most of the work I did was just on like their client facing applications. So I was like an Angular expert at the time. So I would
Okay.
often get brought out for, specifically the front end. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, but as far as that goes, there's really no difference between it being a bank versus it being, a
Yeah.
store or, a blog or anything like that. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah,
The only thing that will change will be let's say the core business that you have to know in order to be able to produce the software. But at the end, you will still be writing softwares. So either
yeah.
it's for a bank or for a web company or like a marketing company, it doesn't really matter. You for sure have to understand the business, their business, in order to be able
Yeah.
to produce great software. But that's the only difference that you really have.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty much there was an understanding like, hey, we're dealing with people's money, so let's make sure we don't mess things up. But
Hmm.
there's not that much you can mess up when you're just working in the on the client side piece of things. Like for the most part, the way it felt to me was, well, we have these services. I actually, for the most part, we didn't touch these services that we would make network calls to.
Hmm.
So this um, this was kind of managed via a data layer. We'd get the data from the data layer, and we were almost in like our own sandbox at that point. So
Hmm.
in that sense, like it's really easy to just work in anything, like from a front end standpoint, whether you're in my specific framework of expertise, which was Angular, but it's really no different than any other JavaScript framework. I think at the end of the day, or just doing it without a framework and just doing straight JavaScript. So, but yeah, so when clients come to you, are you are you getting them set up with like a full stack solution for a lot of these things?
Well, it will depend on the need because if, for example,
Sure.
it's a startup, so they will have no pre-existing solution, so they will
Hmm.
come up with an idea of the thing that they want to implement, like the software. They will describe it, and
Sure.
we will propose a solution. Like depending on what they want, of course, we propose a solution that will match their needs and that we will, if they agree, develop entirely. It can be that, or it can also be existing customer who already have a soft that they want to either maintain or evolve. So they will contract us to be working in their team and to make their software evolve or maintain it. So we really have the two scenarios. When the client is a bank, it's almost always the case that they already have a software that is existing because they've been there for a long time. So they will maybe they will have like a specific need to involve or to improve a part of the soft, or
Mhm.
to connect it with another system because they need to be interconnected, so such things like that. So there is no really a standard. It really depends on the client and the needs. So the kind of application that will be designed at the end will depend on what they want basically, and
Yeah.
it can be both essentially.
Cool. So, your
Yeah.
company specifically, like you mentioned, Angular and Java Spring.
Yeah.
Is that part of your selling point? Are you trying to sell them, "Hey, let's get you on these technologies because you want to be on this technologies, and that's why they come to you?" Or
Not necessarily. So as I mentioned, Angular and Spring Boot is because we have a lot of expertise in those fields. So,
sure,
for example, we have a lot of GDE in Angular. One of is a good colleague of mine, for example, and we also have a lot of people who we use Spring Boot because Spring Boot in the Java ecosystem is one of the most used framework, if not
sure.
the most used framework. So we do also have experts in that field. I personally work a lot with Spring Boot and Angular, but the client, when he will come to us, it will not necessarily require a technology. Sometimes he will, but sometimes will not, and we will basically offer it the best tool that available. If
Mhm.
he's very um, say if he really wants to have a specific stack because for example, he already have a React stack in the ecosystem of the other
Yeah.
application that he maintain,
Mhm.
chances are that he will want to have the same kind of React stack for the new application, for example. So in that case,
Yeah.
we will
Well,
provide that
you probably
expertise.
wanna match their expertise as well, right?
Of
Because
course, of
this is
course,
not a long-standing, scenario, it sounds like, between you and them. It's more you're getting them set up, and you want them to be able to maintain after you've done
exactly.
the work you've come in to do. Cool.
Exactly, and also most clients, they when even when they ask for you to design a tool or software, they will
Mhm.
want it to be done in their premises so that they can have the knowledge of the tool, and
Right.
also they will want their own intern to get used to the tool and to get used to basically maintain it and evolve it, because at the end of the day, if the contractors leave, they want to be able to maintain that soft. So they will
Yeah.
want it to be in the stack that they already have, if possible. And there are very little chances where you will develop something that is totally out of scope from what they are used to do internally, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
cool. So it sounds like this is one that I really loved about here at NX when I first joined was just the amount of experience you get when working in that kind of environment where you're
Hmm.
going between clients a couple times and
Yeah.
like you get to see a lot of the different approaches some of these larger
Hmm.
companies take to like how they manage these projects at these scales and just how to do that stuff. When I first joined NX, I had prior to that I had just been at a smaller company where I was the head JavaScript guy, and I was not a JavaScript guy when I got hired, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like they just
Okay.
needed someone to figure out like we called it the GUIs, like the graphical user interfaces,
Interface.
and
Yeah.
we needed someone who I was the GUI guy. So I would come in and they'd say, "Hey, we need a new GUI for this, or we need a new GUI for this application," and we'd figure it out. And we had a whole set of like legacy systems that were being used. Java Faces, I believe, was like one of the technologies
Okay.
that were being used before I got there. Have you
Hmm.
had experience with that before?
You said Java Faces. I think no, I haven't, because it's a bit before my time, if I can say
Yeah.
that like that. But when
Thanks,
I
Teen.
started,
I feel super old now.
no offense, no offense, but no, I haven't. Not, I know the technology, I know the hit by name, but I never use it at the client. We
Yeah.
were already using the thing that came later after this technology in Java, like the
Yeah.
GSPs for a short time, and then later we didn't even have to manage the GSP. We were managing the then through a framework around like Spring Boot or Spring Core. So yeah, I never
Yeah.
really have to touch those directly, I would say.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, like I mean, I guess coming back to my story and just the reason I brought it up, like
Hmm.
at that point, it was very much I felt very much disjointed from everything else. Like we were turning out stuff, we were making our GUIs, we're getting our clients what they needed, but I definitely had this sense of like we were kind of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what's like stuck, and in
Okay.
terms of like trying to get these GUIs out, and to some extent that was fine. Like we met deadlines, and clients were happy. What more can you ask for? But I didn't have the sense of like there's definitely a lot of imposter syndrome going on, if you're familiar with that
Mm.
term. Like I didn't
I
really
know.
yeah, I didn't really know if this was the right way of doing things. And
Okay.
for sure there was definitely things I knew were it didn't feel enterprise, if that makes sense. It didn't feel
Okay.
enterprise. And then when I came to NX and I started working with a lot of these companies, uh, 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there. I was at one client for several years. It
Hmm.
definitely gave me a lot more confidence in just knowing,
Yeah.
hey, like I've seen most of these things now, so I understand like most of what's going on at this point. And it's very weird how just I feel like I went in the course of a year, like probably my first year at NX, I went from like being very unsure, like I could get stuff done. I'm not sure if the quality is that good. To then about a year later, feeling like I've pretty much seen it all. Like
Hmm.
there's only so many ways to skin a cat, and there's like some things you need to learn. In particular, in front end JavaScript, there's like some weird dimensions of stuff that you just have to know, and it's like
Hmm.
stuff around accessibility, um, like how to properly do the HTML, those kinds of little things. It's like a bunch of little wrinkles that are weird, but for the most part, like you can just kind of distill it down to okay, we got to get stuff done. Let's get it done. Check. And then you do your code reviews, you figure out there's other aspects of things that are interesting that hopefully we can talk about a little bit more. Like one of them is like continuous integration, continuous deployment kind of stuff. It's
Hmm.
interesting to see just the levels that people are at with that dimension of things, and that's something our company has really focused on the last few years since pivoting, not being a consultancy anymore, and just focusing on building out NX as a product, and NX Cloud as its sort of partner project. But yeah, like just working as originally an Angular consultant, and around like my year two at NX, it started to shift where we weren't Angular consultants anymore. We were the NX consultants, and that's a
Hmm.
whole never dimension of stuff because at that point we're actually doing things along the lines of it's almost like the meta level, right?
Yeah.
Like we're doing stuff at the meta level saying, "Hey, here's your repo. Let's build stuff around your repo. Let's build out the automation. Let's build out like what the various tasks are that you want to run. Let's build out, all this stuff to make it so like we're pretty much giving your developers a very consistent experience that leads into like this sort of CI system, this automated system to make sure that every time you're submitting new changes to the code base, we've got you covered in terms of you're running all the checks that you should run,
Hmm.
and only the checks you should run, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm curious when you bring on clients, is there do they ever have you? Is there ever requirements around like that kind of automation, like the CI
Uh,
level?
Yeah, it's. I mean, here in Luxembourg, it's always the case because, as you say, automation is a key to deliver software, like
Yeah.
in the professional manner, and to ensure quality of the software that you deliver. So most of our clients will already have those pipeline in place. Maybe not
Okay.
with NX nor NX Cloud, but we will have something like maybe a Jenkins if they are doing Java related work, or they will have Azure if they people who use, for example, C# for the development, we will have that as a setup. But yeah, most
Hmm.
clients have a CI/CD in place. The level of maturity of that CI/CD is not always the same. depending on the
Right.
client. Things like having like the central Git somewhere that will run tests is most of the time already in place, but not necessarily the part where you will deploy. So the CI part is kind of covered, but not
Yeah.
totally the CD part, the continuous delivery. So, and this depend on the client. Some are like fully CI/CD, so continuous
Mm.
integration and continuous deployment, but there are some who are kind of well covered in the CI. Some are totally covered in the CI, but not necessarily entirely covered in the CD part. So it really depends. And in my company, for example, we do contribute to the development of softwares, but we also do DevOps. So we have engineers who role is to set those things up for some clients who require them. So having
Hmm.
a full CI/CD in place in order to ensure that from the moment the person commits, all the rest of the flow is properly triggered till the end, and the end will depend on what the client needs. If he wants only to have the CI, he will want us to do that part. If you want to go the entire way, he will then automate it. But yeah, that's most of the clients. And the thing that may maybe change is the flexibility in which you can do that, because some clients have old process that is very kind of hard to, let's say, put into a CI/CD pipeline, because,
Hmm.
for example, the application are deployed the old way. They are not necessarily into a container, so Dockerized in an environment that can be easily taken and shift into another environment. So for some clients, before we can properly do that, we need to first maybe rethink some of those applications, or at least make them um, um, in the container so that they can be easily taken, shift, and then added to a CI pipeline. So the scope is very broad, and as always, it's always depending on the clients and on where you want to go, basically. Some
Yeah.
want to go the full way, or they want only to have like a mix of both. So
Yeah.
we adapt based on what they really need.
Right. In particular, I found like the banks that I've worked with, their lack of CD or their lack of
Mhm.
continuous deployment is actually seen as a feature. Like they want to be able to have like those release calls
Control.
where they, yeah. Well, I don't
Yeah.
think it's so much control as much as it is just like if they were to do CD as you know, you and I probably think of it, where
Hmm.
every time you know submit new code, this is being deployed out to you know your production environment. That's how you know NX works. That's how we
Hmm.
work with our internal products. So whenever
Hmm.
we push out you know new code to cloud, at least it goes out to our private NX cloud that we use to you know dog food our products. So if you're not familiar with the term dog fooding to our listeners, that's when you use the product that you're creating. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting term. But yeah, like the idea of doing that many deployments at the some of these banks just sounds completely untenable. Because
Yeah, I
you
agree.
literally do 100 deployments a day. So um
That, and also before you can actually deploy into prod, you need to have like approval process that is like that requires several people
yeah,
to get involved in this approval chain. So it's almost, I mean, I've never seen a client here who is fully CI CD and like we commit, he deploys, he builds everything and then he deploys. I never seen that myself either, because there is always this step of because also before you can actually deploy, as sometimes there might be some interruption in the service that is provided, so you need to prevent the customers beforehand. So
yeah,
yeah, the fully automated deployment is not really, I mean, the high here in Luxembourg is not totally the case, mostly for banks. Maybe it's valid for other like startup who don't really care about this slight interruption that may occur, but that's not the case for most clients. I must say so. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think the goal should be to try to get yourself in a situation where you can manage that because like you said, there's going to be maybe not necessarily interruptions of service, but maybe like you have to figure out the handoff from
Mm,
one version to another.
yeah.
I would love to see a world where the goal for a lot of these large companies is to have that robustly in place, where you have like
Mm,
some sort of automated red green or green blue deployment kind of situation, so
yeah.
you can maintain the
Yeah.
uptime and still be able to get these things out. But it is tricky. Like, I'm not saying it's easy, but
Yeah.
I do
Nice.
think it should be a goal. But,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
go
for
ahead.
sure it's not simple, but
Mhm.
I would say if it also depend on the tools that you use. If, for example,
Yeah.
for the backend or the deployment you are using Kubernetes, for example, which is this container orchestration tool developed by Google, it makes those kind of things easy, like the blue green deployment that you mentioned. It's something that is very well I mean, it's available in Kubernetes. So if you are
Mm.
using that tool, like to manage your deployment of your services into your infrastructure, the work that you will need to do to get to this blue green deployment and automation will be easier than if you're not using Kubernetes at all and you're doing everything manually, because we then have to maybe put together your own pipeline to have this kind of management, and for sure that's not easy. So depending on the tool, it can be easy, but yeah, I agree that it should be a goal, because it makes things easier for everyone, because there is a lot of things that you don't have to wait on, or to require human intervention to do, and
Yeah.
being able to deploy like automatically. I know a great comfort for the developer or for the people who is in charge of that. For example, myself on my plugins that I develop, I have set up semantic release, because I didn't want to manage all the burden of versioning, of generating the changelog and publishing to npm, generating the GitHub release, all that process. I
Yeah.
did it for a long time. It wasn't really bringing any value. So now I only, like, once I'm ready to deploy, I do my changes on my main branch, which is the develop branch that I'm using. And once I'm ready to deploy and to release, I just rebase that work on the master branch, and boom, the CI take care of everything.
Yeah.
And I don't have to to wait or to be doing any stuff, because everything already automated and deployed. And it's a great comfort, because you can focus more on actually providing the service than
Yeah.
maintaining all those cumbersome tasks that are around it.
Yeah.
So for
I
sure,
do
it
think
should be a
that's
goal.
yeah, it's one of those things I think that if you do it right, you only have to do it once.
Yep.
Which is a great that's a great feature, I think, of just having someone to come in and do that work. I think that's why, personally I saw this shift of I was originally much more focused on doing consulting that was like client facing. I was actually working on implementing features for customers at the end of the day. And then I saw
Okay.
this shift from working on primarily that to actually working primarily on this meta level stuff. Maybe you would think of this as DevOps. It doesn't quite seem to me as DevOps. Some of my engagements were more DevOpsy oriented, I guess. There's a couple I had that I was just dealing with GitHub Actions for the most part,
Okay.
which was
Okay.
it is what it is. It was a good experience for sure.
Mhm.
But other times it's not. I want to consider it DevOps as much as it was like, hey, we have 20 different teams and they each have different ways of doing unit tests. Can we get together and like solve this in a better way, so things aren't so segmented off. Which and those are fun engagements too, and not really. I wouldn't call that DevOps so much. It's just like, I don't know, more of that meta programming or meta repo management, I guess. Which
Mhm.
those are fine too. But yeah, I'm curious for have you ever had engagements at your company, for example, where you're just working on enhancing their CI? Is that you ever encountered something like that?
Me personally, not yet. I haven't been able to do that, because I'm mostly a senior software developer. So my job is to develop application mostly.
Hmm.
When we have those kind of requests, the client will be redirected to the people in my company who are DevOps in the sense of the
Okay,
doing those kind of everything related to Kubernetes, to
gotcha.
dockerization, to
So you
containerization.
have actually like people specializing in DevOps. Yeah,
Yeah, in my company
cool.
we have those. We call them DevOps engineers, and their role is really to put together pipelines at clients, and so that they can easily deploy and have the CI part. They will also set up all the tools that are around them. So the Jenkins for the CI or the GitHub Action, depending on the need of the client. And those
Right,
people jobs is to do that really, like maintaining those. If the client is using Kubernetes, they will also put that together. They will do all the stuff it requires to in order to be able to do that, and we consider it as a different job than the one of the person that will develop a software either in Java or an Angular or React related technology. It's really
gotcha.
like a separate job description, and so I haven't been able to do that because I'm mostly on the developer side,
Right.
but this is slightly changing because and it's thanks to NX. We have recently a client that came to us because he was having some issues. I mean, he's having some issues with ECI pipeline. They are using NX for the workspace. They have a huge Angular, I mean, a huge NX monorepo with 700 application and libraries, and apparently their build is very
That's
slow,
that's
both
a big one.
locally.
700.
It's a very big one, and they have like two applications in it, and only the rest of those
Mm,
dependency are like libraries, and
gotcha.
they are saying that the build time is way too high, and they are not using NX Cloud yet. I'm trying to convince them to use NX Cloud in order to benefit from that. But yeah, as part of the job, if we work with them, we will need to. They are using GitLab to as
Okay.
the CI provider, and so we will have to first look at the NX locally and then maybe also tweak the CI in order to have that. And as I'm the expert of NX in my company, I will probably be doing those two because they're kind of connected. And yeah, but this is because it's NX and NX Cloud. If it's outside of this scope, another person will be in charge of doing the work for the client.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. At that first job I was telling you about, where I was the GUI guy, I
Mhm,
do remember a conversation coming up where we were like, "Well, what we really need is like a DevOps engineer."
mhm,
And the idea being like they would just be focused on at the time we were using Jenkins internally,
okay.
and the idea was they would
Mhm,
just get really good at Jenkins, and we'd be able to work with them, and they would be able to do all the deployments and stuff like that. And I
mhm.
remember the leadership being like, "Isn't that what you guys are supposed to do?" And we were like, "Yeah, I guess so." But it is nice to have it is nice to see that, you know, there's people specializing in that. But
Yeah.
also interesting to see, like as you mentioned, you're being brought in to do something that probably would be considered, you know, DevOpsy traditionally, but you're being brought into that because you're an expert here in NX Cloud or NX and NX Cloud. So
Mhm,
that's really cool. That's kind
yeah.
of the vision that we at NX had for, you know, a lot of this stuff was like DevOps is complicated and it
Mm,
doesn't necessarily need to be, especially if you have like this knowledge, you know, this information layer, I guess, of how your repository works, how things depend on each other. It seems like it should be pretty much a managed solution that you shouldn't need to hire a person for. It should be something you could easily, you know, just have for the sake
mm,
because you've built this information layer, and then
yeah.
NX can just take that information layer and say, "Hey, let us automate that automation for you." So we're automating the automation is kind of the idea
Yeah.
behind what behind what we're trying to accomplish. So and in that world, I don't think you need necessarily someone doing the DevOps role because it's It's almost like we were trying to solve it almost declaratively. Where we're saying, "Hey, this is your repo. This is actually the projects. This is actually how they depend on each other." Um, all the information we need to build out a very optimized, you know, approach to CI. If what you're trying to do, like, if your goal for that continuous integration automation is to just say, "Hey, before anything is, let's make sure we run all the assertions that we agreed on." So
Mm,
that's a pretty easy thing to do. I am curious about, so you mentioned there was the one company that was having very long build times. Was that
yeah.
actually the build time, or is that like the build time, but also the testing, but also the linting and
Well,
stuff like that?
indeed, I say the build time, but actually it was the testing that is slow. And just for the record, this company, we are still in, um, let's say, discussion with them because they just
Sure.
exposed me the problem last week, and we haven't have our eyes on the repo itself to know to see what that is a problem. They just
Yeah.
explained the consequence, and indeed it's in the testing phase. They're saying that whenever they will, well, for example, locally when they run the command to build test the different application,
Hmm.
apparently it takes a lot of time. I suspect that they may have a lot of dependencies that are maybe not necessary or that are build or test every single time when they do a change that is not related. So maybe
Hmm.
some bad configuration on the files that are reported as being affected by the change that are done. I suspect that. Or also, maybe they have other setups in the local workspace that can be improved. I don't think necessarily that the cloud part will be is the main bottleneck. I think they already have the issue locally, so they will for sure benefit if they move to the cloud with Phoenix Cloud and the splitting caching and everything around that. But the core issue, in my opinion, is locally. So we still have to see the code and to see
Sure.
the workspace and to know better. But yeah, it was during the testing that they had this issue because they are doing some testing, some snapshot testing through Storybook in order to assure that the component
Mm.
that they have in the UI doesn't change because they will snapshot the very dumpy HTML that is produced by the component, and they will compare it with the snapshot that they have in store. And
Right.
for they explained it so far, they didn't use the storybook way of doing things. They have implemented their own solution to do that snapshot into HTML and then compare it. So I suspect that the bottleneck is in this area, but yeah, we still need to investigate to be sure about that. But I think in the end, it's really probably a bad configuration or a tool or this custom conversion that is not optimized as it should be. But we
Yeah.
still need to have a deeper look and better understand their workspace.
Yeah. Well, it's
But
interesting. When you said like the build is taking a long time, I did. The reason I asked was, I was curious if it's the build itself or if it was like other pieces of the build, and because it's interesting to see like we kind of collectively come together on these terms for it, like the build. That was the assertion. I imagine that they're talking about.
yeah,
Like they're trying.
I think
It's
when I say build, I was referring to, yeah, it was maybe it's not the right word. You are correct about that. I was mostly referring to the build in
I
terms of the CI
I
time
think it
that
was the right
you
term. It's just we had to we're not as discreet about these terms as I wish we were. And
yeah,
part of that is maybe we're just things are still growing in that area, but I absolutely say build times. When I'm waiting
okay,
on a PR, for example, I say I'm waiting on the build, or I'm the build time's too long. But I know
yeah,
it's not the
okay.
build. I know it's like the testing. It's the CI pipeline essentially is taking too
Mhm.
long, right? So yeah,
Mm.
uh,
So yeah, so that's the idea, and of course we are trying to. They are using so they have this setup with GitLab, so it's a custom
yeah,
setup that they have, and for the to have the distributed cache, they are using a third party solution like
Okay.
that was cheaper at the time. It's Min IO. I don't know if you know this tool, but they are using an implementation that they did for the Dash Runner, and
Yeah.
in order to store the artifact and to have it shared across the team. And because at the time it was cheaper,
Yeah.
I'm trying to convince them, of course, to move to NXCloud because I think you guys did a great job on the pricing. So if everything is okay, maybe they will consider it for the project. Hopefully.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things that I encountered on some of those engagements I had where I was working mostly on the CI part, you kind of
Mhm.
have this like if you let GitHub Actions, for example, they absolutely have this idea of like caching artifacts and stuff like that,
Mhm.
which is like it's okay to work with. So the idea would be like early in the phase we're going about this very step by step. We're saying, okay, first let's run our build, and when the build is complete, we're going to have that artifact, which is the built application. Then we're going to use that artifact and we're going to put it in the cache. And then when we go to our next one of our next workflows, which is the testing workflow, its first thing is it's going to pull the built artifact out of the cache, and we're going to test on that. And that sounds easy, but it's actually like it's complicated just because, like, first of all, you're hard coding the order in this which these things have to happen, and it's not fun to pull this stuff out of cache and figure out all these things. Which manageable but not great, I guess is how I'd describe it. But as soon as we brought in the NX, the idea of NX Cloud, where NX Cloud is just this cache that works not like a cache that you like imperatively tell it, okay, store in cache, now pull from cache, now store in cache, now pull from cache. You just say, hey, run the test, and NX will know, well, a dependency of that test is that we need to have the build have done first. And especially if you're in this world where you have these distributed workflows, or in the case of like using NX agents, where you have distributed, you just have a bunch of machines out there just running tasks and being driven by the NX cloud as an orchestrator of all these tasks. You just it's really just a matter of, well, NX sees I got to run the build first before I run the test. Doesn't even have to be on the same machine. Like, I'm not telling it, okay, on machine one run the build, and then later on machine two pull the build from machine one, and then we can go. We're just saying, hey, just run all my tests, run all my builds, and run all my lints. And NX is the whole system we built is around, like, that's all you needed to say, and we're going to figure out how to do that, and also how to share that artifact in between machines, like without even thinking about it. Like, I'm not thinking, okay, I got to make sure the caching's correct on this. Got to make sure I'm not pulling like something from the cache that's actually invalid. Like, this is something that actually happened to me about when I was trying to pull like the cache artifact. If there were multiple things going, if there were multiple like PRs going at the same time, I had this bug one time where I was pulling the artifact from another workflow that
Okay.
wasn't related, and I was just this is more of a pain than it needs to be. And the
And
the
it's
whole
very
goal with
hard
the product,
to debug even those kind of issues when you are
yes,
using the wrong cache. It's a nightmare to to find that's the issue
yeah,
most
it
of the
took me a
time.
while to figure out, this is what was happening. I probably
Mhm.
just could have looked at, the hash on the built artifact and been able to tell, but it didn't occur to me at first, like it wasn't even on my radar. I was just like, oh, obviously, the GitHub caching is going to uh, be able to pull the one from this run, and not the case,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, no,
And probably my
I
own
follow you.
fault, just because I told it to like pull the most recent one out, which it
Mhm.
did what I told it to. It's just it didn't do what I wanted it to, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So yeah,
No,
but
okay.
the cool thing is with NX Cloud, you don't this that whole problem, that whole dimension of problems goes away. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's really a good addition. And as you said, the other thing also that is always complicated with those CI/CD things is to maintain the pipelines based on how the
Yes.
project grows. And with Nxcloud, once you have done this main file that define your workflow, you don't really have to worry about how, even how, depending on how your project is getting bigger and bigger, uh, with more projects being added or more libraries being added, you don't have to ever change that main file that define your main workflow, because NX will automatically do the work for you. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really like a game changer in my opinion, and it's taking a lot of pain out of the developer. So it's very good in that regard.
Yeah. Well, hopefully too, it's like um, for some, like you said, there's with the clients we had, there's completely varied levels of maturity around the automation they had. So we
Hmm.
definitely had some people that were just running every test, every PR, which is fine kind of until like you enter into the scale where like the project you mentioned, 700 libraries.
Hmm.
If you're running tests on each of those individually, especially if they're each individual one is taking a long time, that adds up quick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
figuring out a way of saying, well, hey, we have to at least look at the PR and say,
Mm.
oh, what actually could have changed, so we can at least filter this down. Those that's something that you don't need NX Cloud as a product to do. You just need like the idea of or have NX installed, and you get like the NX affected command, which is going to give you essentially that filter, even
Hmm.
without caching. Like in some ways, it's weird because um, NX affected and using like the NX Cloud cache, um, they're not actually like precise replacements for each other, but they do kind of solve the same class of problems just in a different way. Um, so yeah, it's being able to use NX affected, at least I think there's no buy-in for that. You don't have to commit to paying any money or buying any service to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
That's a nice thing to have out of the box. But yeah, the caching is definitely uh, for me like the biggest advantage of the NX cache is to get that level of caching without having to like imperatively you know put in the caching yourself. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree, and I will also add like so for me definitely the caching managed cache is a great addition, but I also
Mhm.
like the fact that in terms of logging, it's also great because when you have big projects with a lot of application in them, mostly when something fail, it's very complicated to pinpoint the exact project that has failed and for
Yeah.
which reason it has. And I think with the interface that NXCloud provides, with the filtering that are in place, it's really very easy to quickly identify those projects and see exactly the log trace, the stack trace that mentioned the error. And so it makes the resolving of that error faster because you can easily locate the issue and then decide on the proper fix. So this is really also a good addition, I would say, of having the NX Cloud in terms of tool to have the CI part.
Yeah. So this actually reminds me of I think this was a late night with one of our clients, and I'm on a call with Victor, our CTO, and he's
Hmm.
we're trying to figure out there's been a sudden uptick in the test one of the testing tasks. So we're trying to figure out what's going on, and the only tools that we have from the output of this task that ended up taking a long time was like a single document that's just like the entire standard out of everything that was ever run inside of the CI pipeline.
Hmm.
It's like it was at least 100,000 lines, and we're just sitting there in a browser looking at this thing, and we're thinking of like clever things to like control F to see if we can isolate it. So we're like control Fing
Yeah.
for error, and it's like, okay, good. There's only like 200 of them. Let's scroll through them until we find like the right one. And just I think that night is kind of one of the things that inspired Victor to really want to create NX Cloud in the way where we just have very easy to search and find. Hey, let's find the one task. Let's just see what
Mhm.
actually happened with that one, as opposed to, and this one document where by the way, like the standard outs were thrashing each other, and it wasn't exactly clear how the thrashing was happening either. So yeah,
Okay.
that was wild. But yeah, that's definitely, I think that's a world a lot of people are still in to this day.
Yeah.
Is just,
Yeah,
you have
for
to,
sure.
yeah. I think like
All the
Jenkins.
classic CI providers don't really have this smart way of filtering based on the error that are output. So you always
Yeah,
have to, yeah, kind of do a control F in order to find the occurrence of the fail or errors. So yeah, it's not that easy to find
yeah.
to
Well,
pinpoint at least.
it's very odd to me, at least the way these things were built, because it seems like such an obvious thing to a developer. Like, what do you want? Well, I want segmented logs of each individual task that happens inside of the CI
Hmm.
pipeline, and like the
Yeah.
pipelines are really meant to be that way. Like, everything I've had with Jenkins, for example, you can see the stages of the builds, you can see the individual tasks for this, but if you want to actually like pull the logs from that, it doesn't seem, there's not a good interface for that. It's just, you're pretty much just given the, here's a text file of the
Mhm.
standard out. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it gets the job done, yes, but it's like, especially if you're doing a lot of things in one step, like we were obviously doing in that one example, it's like it doesn't help you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
so
agree.
yeah, so that's one interesting aspect of things. Um, uh, with the time we have left, Tina, I'm wondering if maybe we could adjust things a little bit,
Mhm.
and just talk about your perspective from working with your clients. What are people's takes on mono repos right now?
Okay. So I will speak about Luxembourg because I don't know the other ecosystem. Um, in Luxembourg, sorry, I was having a call. That's why I was kind of distracted.
No worries.
In Luxembourg, the monorepo is getting more and more used. I think
Mhm.
people kind of use it already in the back in the day because not necessarily with the front end at least, but with the back end, because they will be, for example, using Maven or Gradle and using like multi-module projects within those applications, and
Sure.
so they will have in the same workspace those different either application and libraries split into Maven or Gradle model. So this was
Mhm.
already in place, and so that's why a lot of clients that I see, they don't really see right away the benefit of NS because they think that this setup that they already have is already as good as it is. And they also don't really see NX as being a tool that can help them maintain those monorepo like easily with the visualization tools and everything around it. So um, I have to do a lot of um, convincing, or I have to discuss a lot with them in order to make them see the value of NX in managing those existing monorepo. And
Mhm.
I also think that the fact that NX started as this tool to manage monorepo that will contain mostly Node.js related projects like Angular, Nest, React, etc. They a lot of people still think that NX is only for the front end, and they don't really
Mhm.
see it as being able to manage other stack. Well, this is no longer the case officially with the NX Gradle plugin that
Yeah.
was released. So I think that going forward, this will improve how the company that do mostly Java, for example, related development will see NX, and at least I'm hopeful for that. And I also think that as long as you guys, I mean, when you guys will provide this equivalent of NX Gradle, but for Maven, which is this other very well used tool for managing Java projects, I think when this will be in place officially, I think the even more company will, I guess, consider it as a potential good replacement for the existing, not really a replacement, but a tool that they can really easily add it on top of the existing Maven multi-module project or Gradle multi-module projects. So that's the way I see it. And but for the moment, we still need to basically convince them or train them in order to them to really see NX as being this tool that can help them manage those kind of projects. Because for the clients that are doing front end, this most of them are using NX because they are
Oh,
doing
really?
Angular, they are doing React. So
Okay.
at least whenever we try to whenever we implement those solutions for those clients, we will promote NX because it makes our life easier as developers. So we will try to do that. And as they will not see any counter argument not to use it. So we will just convince them that it's better and they will go with it. But for the backend part, we still have a lot of convincing to do and a lot of trainings, a lot of talks to give and to really make them see the benefit for the backend.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, I'm very happy with the NX Gradle plugin, and it's actually like the plugin itself is really just for me, it's a proof of the value of what we built with the Project Crystal stuff, which
Yeah.
was, hey, like if you want to use NX to manage like the stuff that you already have with
Mm-hmm.
Gradle, you
Mm-hmm.
actually like you just keep your Gradle files. And
Yeah.
the way NX is going to work, the way the plugin works is it just parses that, and we know like
Yeah.
we all the that everything inside of that information layer that NX needs is just populated by the fact that you had your those Gradle files present, and
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much all we need, and we can just provide all the value that we give from all the tools that we've created. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like you said, like the Gradle is a great proof of value for that, because if we can do it for Gradle, like we could probably do it for Maven too. It's just a matter
Yeah,
of
at this,
we got to,
I'm
yeah,
very looking forward to the official NX Maven plugin because I think that will really boost the adoption rate for people here in Luxembourg, for example, who are doing Java development because a lot of
yeah,
companies are still using Maven as the build system tool. So yeah, once
interesting.
if the official support come from NX, I think this will really like break out the other all the people that are still not convinced. I think they will be convinced once this is the case. So
Yeah, well, that's very cool. I think we're still figuring out in some ways, like RG for a lot of this stuff. Like in some ways, the idea was like, well, what do we do with all the plugins? Like, should we just have a plugin for every build system that's out there?
mhm.
And maybe that is the direction we end up going at some point. But I think there's like the idea is, we would have wanted for if the people running Maven wanted to make their own plugin for that
Mhm.
specifically, that would really be the a great goal for us, to be able to be to be able to not have to maintain each individual tool, just because we don't know all the changes that are coming up with everything and all the different intricacies of every different build tool. But yeah, I don't know. So a long way of saying I don't know if we're going to get an official NX Maven. I hope there's like a
Yeah.
community one that comes up, or there's some even better like one
Well,
from Maven. But yeah.
I kind of solved this problem with my plugin because, for example, the one that I've created for Spring Boot, Quarkus, and Micronauts, which are like
Yeah.
very well-known Java-related framework, they do have support for both Gradle and Maven, but it's focused with the tool, like with the framework, either Spring Boot or Quarkus or Micronauts. It's not like
Mm.
NX Maven or NX Gradle plugin, even if you use those tools underneath to do the work, but it's still like focus on the specific framework. So, and I think that you guys kind of solve the issue of supporting other
Yeah.
stack because with the plugin system and the dev kit that you provide, it's really easy for a third party to add that missing tool if it's not yet in place.
Yeah.
When I was mentioning the official plugin, I think because when it's officially maintained by you guys, people are maybe more confident in
Yeah, for
order
sure.
to migrate.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's
Well, one of the issues that we've had at NX, in my opinion, is just like the surface area is so large
mhm,
of everything we touch because we're trying to build like support for a very wide ecosystem, and we've just added Gradle into that, and with
mhm,
Gradle comes, you all of Java and like all of Kotlin with it, right?
mhm,
So, so yeah, it's interesting because we want to. It's like a two fronted battle where we want to try to keep the surface area small so we can focus on what NX does well, but we also want to make
mhm,
sure it's solving problems for everyone, and so like those two things are kind of at odds with each other.
mhm.
So so yeah, I don't know if the Maven one's coming out. I'll mention it for sure to the core team. We'll see what we can do. But
Cool.
yeah, that's it's cool to see that people are receptive, especially like receptive to the ideas we're putting forth. So
Yeah.
you mentioned like front ends is it's an easier sell at this point.
For
Um,
sure. For me, I think it's a no-brainer to, if for example you are doing Angular, React, Vue development. For me, it's almost a no-brainer to use NX to manage that because of
yeah,
the all the features that you have out of the box, integration with the other tools in the ecosystem.
yeah,
It makes it very like a no-brainer. It's
yeah.
you have to use
That's
it.
good to hear. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's a goal with a lot of the work we've done there, and that speaking of surface area, that's a whole piece of it too. Is we want to make sure like we have good scripts so that people can just start up a new project and they have all the tools that they want to have as a developer like in there, like
Mhm,
prettier linting, ESLint, unit testing with whatever unit testing framework they prefer, be it Jest or like VTest or something like that. And then like
mhm,
also what are you using for the builds? And so the idea is, well, using the NX ecosystem, you run the generator scripts. We ask you maybe a few questions, and then you're ready to go. So
yeah.
that's the goal for what we're trying to do there, and hopefully people see the value of that for sure. But but yeah, I'm wanting to bring it up because I'm curious. Like you mentioned, front end people generally receptive, back end people generally skeptical still. But
Well,
what
for
about the
backend,
idea?
I just want
Yeah.
to precise that it's backend, like not JS related backend. Like if it's
Mm.
Node.js or although
Yes.
these other backend that are still in the Node.js ecosystem, I think it's also a no-brainer. But
Yeah.
especially for the Maven or I mean Kotlin or this other backend, then it's a bit more. I see at least a little bit of resistance from the clients here in Luxembourg for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, like you said, it stands to reason. They're like, well, we have multi-module Gradle that we're using, so that's
Mhm.
how we're going to solve this problem, and that makes sense. Hopefully, what we've done, and maybe what they don't understand yet, is just say, well, just layer NX on top of that, and you can use what you've already have, and there's just like an
Yeah,
extra layer of value on top.
yeah.
Hopefully that's that would be a good selling point. But the question I wanted to ask you was, what about the idea of putting those two worlds together into one repo? Have you encountered? I would assume
Ah,
there's resistance for that, but
okay, you mean having the front end with, let's say, Angular or React, and on the other
yeah,
side
let's
having the back
say
end?
yeah, like I don't know if you actually have a specific instance of this, but I imagine you probably have something you could analogize where you have like a Spring Boot backend that's specifically made for one front end project w-
Okay.
and you want to put these two things together into one repo using NX. Have you come across that? And have you hit any like resistance or friction from people like
Well,
on either wanting to be just like, well, no, I want my own space. Stop.
well, that's one topic I am trying to promote whenever I go to a client that is using, let's say, Maven and already NX for the front end. Because, for
Right.
example, for the last client, the last customer where I work, for which I worked, they were using at the beginning Angular Workspace to maintain the application and workspace. I mean, application and library, sorry, and
Mm,
I managed to convince them to move to NX in order to manage that Angular workspace into a proper NX workspace. and we successfully do the transition, and they were very happy with the performance boost and the productivity boost that he brought to the table. And they also have, as you say, the backend that was in both technologies. One part was using Maven, the other part was using Gradle, and
Okay.
I first introduced them to NX through the Angular related part, and at the end of the project, I tried to convince them to also migrate the backend part to NX in order to have one single unified build system that we do all the work, and we don't have to worry about how things depend on the other things. But
Yeah.
it was I saw a lot of, I mean, a bit more resistance on that part, to be honest, because the setup was already in place to build using Gradle and the related stuff for the backend. And also for this specific client, we didn't have time to invest in this kind of technical subjects because they had a lot of business requirements that we wanted to progress on. So
Hmm.
moving to NX to manage the entire thing didn't really bring for them a value because we were already overwhelmed with the business stuff that we have to do. So we
Sure.
never get chance to do it. They saw the point, they saw the benefit, but at the end we were out of time in order to do that. But whenever because I also do some trainings, I train our people for in my company to use NX, and in the trainings that I've created, I always demo a project where you have a Angular application that is using an Angular library, that is using a common TypeScript library. This common TypeScript library is being used by a React library, which is used by a React application. And on the other side, I have a Spring Boot application that is the backend for those for this Angular application. And I will showcase them that all this entire thing can be managed with NX, and I will show the NX graph in order to see all those projects appearing in the same UI, and
Hmm.
the fact that you can always navigate between the two, and they are always amazed to see that indeed you can have all those technology basically in the same workspace, and it makes things very easier because if you can have this picture of your workspace, which is always up to date because it's NX Graph, it's always up to date. You don't have to maintain any documentation to showcase the different projects that are within your workspace, and also you don't have to not to maintain, but you don't have either to. I mean, you also better understand how each project depend on the other because we see
Yeah.
the link between the different projects for the graph. So it really helps understanding quickly how the workspace is set up and how it works. So I always try to promote that, and whenever I'm doing conf related to NX, I always showcase this kind of example. I shared you a link on the chat where I have this repo on GitHub where you have this picture with all the free stack all together, and yeah, with NX you see that it's really easy to get this setup in place.
Yeah. It's really cool. I'll try to stitch that into the video when it comes out.
No
But
problem.
yeah, it's great. Like this is exactly like that. What one of the things I really got into NX for, and this was back when I was at the GUI company before I was hired by them. The
Hmm.
dependency graph was really helpful because it actually gave like I always wanted this kind of like 1,000 foot view of what's going on with the application,
Yeah.
and especially if you're like if you're being thoughtful about how you want your different modules to work and how you want all these different things to interact, like the dependency graph was exactly that. Like it's the 1,000 foot view, and being able to do that too as it's evolving, like making sure like you didn't upset the graph or you didn't like create dependencies where you didn't want them, and like just
Mm.
how should this look was also like just a thought that we would have, like, well, if we wanted to do these modules correctly, how should it look? Let's like there should be one scheduling module, there should be like one, I don't know, timing module, something like that, and then you figure out all
Mhm.
those things. They're like, okay, this is what we want to build, now let's go build it. um, yeah, it was really satisfying to see that play out, honestly. So
Totally
you
agree.
know that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you that specifically is it seems like to me like one of the biggest benefits of being able to have a mono repo is like let's just have one repo where I can put all of my updates back end and front end and just
Mm.
like have them. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to be publishing to npm. I don't want to be publishing packages to Java. I don't necessarily want to be like pushing out my services to staging if I want to test my front end against it. Like let's just put
Mhm.
it all in one spot and like give a really easy way of serving these things together or like having them running together in my local environment. So,
Yeah.
and that like a lot of our conversation has been focused on like CI/CD. That has like this aspect that we're talking about has actually nothing to do with that. It's only about the local development environment. But it does end up having like helping with the that CI's problem that we have. So, I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it comes down to like let's just declaratively let's use like some declarative principles around our actual repo and let's build tools around that to make things better. I think that's
Mhm.
kind of what we've been trying to do at NX. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And even when you think about this, having the back end and the front end in the same monorepo, it makes sense
Mhm.
because most of the time when you will, let's say, implement a feature, that feature will have a front end maybe and also a back end that is actually doing the work. So
Yeah.
having the feature done in a single go, like a single commit, where you will touch both things, because most of people are full stack developer. At least that's my case.
Yeah.
So you will touch the two environment, the two worlds, so it makes sense to be able to have the two in the same repo in order to even for the history of the your commits, you will see the feature as with all the things that were impacted by the feature, the front end and the back end, and also it makes testing, building, and serving locally easier because of
Yeah.
the correlation that is enforced by the monorepo.
Yeah, well,
So yeah,
especially like
it's
the
totally cool.
alternative just is so ornery. Like where you have to like let's do two PRs that need to be merged at about the same time
Hmm.
or else.
Yeah, yeah, it's a headache.
It's
I totally agree. It's a headache,
yeah.
and I think
And
it
some of these
brings
larger places
room.
too, it's hard enough to just get one PR merged in a timely manner.
Yeah,
But trying to have that happen twice, but also the additional complexity of like coordinating those two things, linking them
mm,
together somehow across repositories, is madness. I think so.
yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
Totally agree.
But yeah, cool. We've been going for over an hour. How are you feeling?
Really?
Yeah.
It's always as when we just started.
I know. It always feels that way. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Teen, wanted to thank you so much for, giving us your insight. Really appreciate it. Your insight and your time, sir. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks, man. Well, cool. We'll wrap it up and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Bye, everyone.